Ever wondered who's really running the show in the world today? Imagine the power shifting from the usual Western giants to rising stars in Asia. Well, it's happening right now, and the driving force behind this shift is BRICS. You might have heard of BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but do you know why it's such a big deal? Over the past 2 decades, global economic power has been astonishingly restructured. This shift is driven primarily by the rise of China and the broader BRICS countries. In this video, we'll explore the rise of BRICS and how this group is set to change the world. But before you continue watching, consider subscribing to our channel to show your support. The economic rise of the developing world. Did you know that the BRICS countries have surpassed the G7 in terms of their share of the world's total GDP? In 2018, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa overtook the G7 in purchasing power parity. By 2024, the gap widened even more, with BRICS holding 35% of the world's GDP compared to the G7's 30%. China has firmly established itself as the world's second-largest economy, with a GDP more than 3 times larger than Japan's and Germany's, and about 75% the size of the US. India is also growing fast and aims to become the 3rd largest economy by the end of this decade. However, the other BRICS countries haven't performed as spectacularly. Brazil and Russia's share of global GDP has remained the same since 2001. South Africa, while not the largest economy in Africa, still plays a significant economic role on the continent. Some G7 members are in a similar situation. Italy and Japan have seen little growth for years, and the UK has also struggled. Just as China dominates BRICS, being twice the size of all the others combined, the US is now bigger than the rest of the G7 combined. Both the US and China dominate their respective groups more than ever. But BRICS is expanding. While the new BRICS members don't yet contribute significantly to the bloc's GDP, many have significant growth ahead of them. New members like Ethiopia and Egypt are projected to see 1,170% and 635% GDP growth by 2050, respectively. With these emerging markets joining, BRICS will boost its economic potential even further. Goldman Sachs forecasts that by 2050, BRICS will overtake the G7 in terms of GDP, even without its new members. Whether these projections come true remains to be seen, but with BRICS intent on adding more members, the group is likely to eclipse the G7's GDP in the coming decades. Trade among BRICS nations has grown significantly, driven by complementary economic structures and a commitment to strengthening economic ties. China and India, with their large consumer markets, offer great opportunities for exports from Brazil, Russia, and South Africa, which are rich in natural resources and agricultural products. Intra-BRICS trade has been a key focus for the member countries as they aim to leverage their collective economic strengths and reduce dependency on traditional Western markets. BRICS can be a game-changer for developing countries by providing an alternative to the traditional Western-centric economic order. Through stronger trade links, financial support, and infrastructure development, BRICS helps lift nations out of poverty and spurs growth. This collective strength reduces dependency on Western markets and opens new opportunities for economic prosperity, promoting inclusive growth and sustainable development across the developing world. And this is how BRICS can change the world in the future. The rise of de-dollarization. The upcoming BRICS meeting in Russia will focus on de-dollarization, aiming to reduce reliance on the US dollar in cross-border trade. BRICS is exploring ways to undermine the dollar's dominance in global transactions. Sergei Ryabkov, Russia's deputy foreign minister, said de-dollarization will be a top priority at the 2024 summit. Currently, at least 20 countries, including Brazil and many Southeast Asian states, are trading using their own currencies. Even Japan, a close US-EU ally, is considering local currencies for cross-border trade. This trend has been accelerated by geopolitical tensions and their economic impacts. Using the US dollar exposes countries to the risk of US economic sanctions. By diversifying their reserves and trade settlements into other currencies, nations can protect themselves from US political pressures and economic sanctions. For example, Russia and Iran have faced significant US sanctions, prompting them to explore alternative currencies for international trade. Over the past decade, the US dollar accounted for over 70% of central banks' foreign exchange reserves, but by the end of 2022, this dropped to 58%. Sanctions aren't the only reason for BRICS' shift from the dollar. Higher interest rates in the West have added to the incentive. Many emerging market companies issue dollar-denominated debt. For instance, about half of China and India's external debt is in US dollars. The same is true for countries like Ethiopia and Argentina. The dominance of the US dollar in trade and finance exacerbates inflation and currency devaluation in many emerging markets. Most global trade in commodities is conducted in US dollars, so when domestic currencies devalue, the cost of importing dollar-denominated raw materials rises, causing further inflation. Meanwhile, China is rapidly reducing its ownership of US Treasury bonds and boosting its gold reserves. China's holdings of US Treasury bonds decreased to $775 billion, staying below the $1 trillion mark since 2022. Interestingly, Japan, a US ally, is also moving away from the dollar due to the decline of the US economy and exchange rates, influenced by significant internal and external debts. With the rise of US hegemony and the weaponization of the dollar, more countries are calling for de-dollarization. As BRICS expands and more countries join, it will challenge the dollar's dominance and create a more balanced global economy, fostering greater economic cooperation and resilience. And BRICS will become the lead that kickstart the de-dollarization process, a global platform for smaller countries. According to the government of South Africa, more than 40 countries have expressed interest in joining this bloc of developing nations. As an important platform for cooperation among emerging markets and developing countries, BRICS is the representation and voice of emerging markets and developing countries. Altogether, the BRICS nations account for over 40% of the world population. At its core, BRICS provides an alternative forum for cooperation between major developing world economies. But beyond just representing emerging markets, BRICS enables cooperation on the global stage that is liberated from the structural constraints or biases of Western-led institutions. This appeals to many smaller countries as well, who do not want multilateralism to be defined and bounded solely by Western interests or worldviews. Yet BRICS also provides opportunities for positive-sum collaboration on issues like development financing, without necessarily being zero-sum toward the West either. Its founding ethos rejects coercion and upholds national sovereignty. By banding together, BRICS countries collectively negotiate and advocate for their interests, making their voices louder and more impactful in international forums like the United Nations, World Trade Organization, and G20. This collective strength helps smaller countries within the group to exert greater influence than they might individually. Western countries, particularly the United States, have historically held significant sway over global institutions like the IMF, World Bank, and NATO. BRICS countries challenge this hegemony by advocating for reforms in these institutions to better reflect the realities of the 21st century and the growing influence of emerging economies. By doing so, they push for a more equitable representation of global interests. And this is why BRICS is important to the world. Many countries want to join BRICS because it offers an opportunity to be part of a powerful coalition that advocates for a more balanced and multipolar global order, challenging Western dominance. It demonstrates that voices beyond those of the United States and Europe, including those from smaller countries, are important on the global stage. Do you think more countries should join BRICS? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.